I don't know if it's only me who has come to this realization, but in today's society, the concept of true confidence has actually been miscrutinized. And what I mean by this is that we have been lied to and we have been deceived as a society on what the ideology of true confidence is. This video, or basically the idea of this video, is more or less tied to a video which I just currently did called True Peace. And it was actually God's perspective and man's perspective on what true peace is. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about what is God's perspective on what true confidence is. What is man's perspective, basically the world's perspective on what true confidence is. And I have personally come to realize that God's ideology, God's perspective, God's POV on what true confidence is simply submission. Someone who is simply being submissive. Submissive to what exactly? Simple. Submissive to his ways, submissive to his will. Most importantly, submissive to his word, which is truth. That is what God believes someone who is of true confidence is. And what is man's or the world's perspective on what true confidence is? Basically, it's just ego. Someone who is performative, someone who is prideful, somebody who is actually having a lot of insecurities in them. It's just that they use that performative side of them to show someone who they are not. Basically, fakeness. And above all, it's about someone who is controlling, someone who is controlled, someone who likes to lord over people, someone who thinks that they can own people, someone who thinks that they have dominance over people. And that is actually a very bad perspective if you actually think about it. Because God's perspective on true confidence is freeing. Freeing in the sense that it acknowledges and respects people's free will on how they decide to live life. Because it ties down to someone actually minding their own business. But someone who is very egoistic, someone who is very performative, someone who is very controlling, who thinks that they can lord and be dominant over people's lives and over life in general, is someone who actually is not a freed person. Someone who thinks that they can take control over people. And you can't do that because this is something I really emphasize on my videos. We have been blessed with the gift of free will. So people are going to do whatever they want to do, regardless of you thinking you can take control over them or not. And someone who has an egoistic mindset, an egoistic perspective on what true confidence is, does this because they do not acknowledge the fact that people are free to choose whatever they want to do. They simply want to make choices for people, thinking that it's going to better their lives, but to be honest, it's not. And if you actually think about it, submission actually ties down to someone being humble, someone who doesn't think highly of themselves. But even if you think about it, even the ideology of humility in itself, which is actually tied to submission in a way, has also been miscrutinized. We have been lied to and deceived to as a society, especially in the religious concept, in the religious perspective, where people think that true humility is, yes, true humility is you not thinking highly of yourself, but it also means that you do not allow people to just mistreat you, trample over you, and just do you dirty. That's not what true humility is. True humility is acknowledging the fact that yes, you are surrendered and submitted to someone who is actually higher than you, who is more knowing than you, who is more powerful than you. And that's God. But it can also not only be God, but it can also be someone who is older than you or someone who is younger than you. It goes two ways because the word of God says that you cannot hate God and no, you cannot love God and hate man. It doesn't work because God in himself is in man. So you have to submit both to God and to man. Submitting to God means that you are fearful of him, you respect him. But submitting to man means that you do not think highly of yourself and you are also a person who is willing to serve man to better people. But also, humility also means that you do not allow people to mistake your kindness for you being weak. Because if you think about it, being submissive, being humble, it's a form and it's an art of pure strength in the eyes of God. You being humble and you being submissive to people doesn't actually mean that you are weak. No, it actually means that you are practicing the purest form of love. Because at the end of the day, humility is actually a form of love. And we know that love has boundaries. Love has boundaries in the sense that it does not just allow anyone or anybody to mistreat them or just use them anyhow. But someone in a way who is very egoistic, someone in a way who is very insecure about themselves, they will actually allow anyone to trample over them. And that's something bad because why? Someone who is very humble, someone who is very submissive, they have a level of inner strength in them. They have a level of not caring what people think about them and not caring what people actually say about them. Because at the end of the day, someone who is humble is already validated within themselves in the eyes of God. So basically, they already know their identity in God and they already know their worth and their value in God. So whatever anyone says towards them, they do not care. Whatever anyone thinks about them, they do not care. And someone who is very humble, they do not force anything about on not about they do not force anything onto anyone, especially like when it comes to them proving a point. They do not care if they prove a point. If you understand their point or not, they simply move on. Because at the end of the day, they know that there is a God of truth out there, and they are simply just representing him by what they say. Because someone who is very humble will keep you in check. Someone who is very humble will not want you to do stupid things to make you go down the drain. No, someone who is very humble will see that, hey, what you're doing is it's bad for you, and I want what's best for you. But they won't force you to align to what they think is best for you. They simply just tell you, then you do whatsoever as you please with what they have actually informed you. But someone who is egoistic, someone who is very insecure, someone who is performative, they want followers, they want validation, they are scared of being alone. So they tend to hide and impose their insecurities onto people. They tend to seek they tend to seek validation and towards people. So if you think about it, someone who is submissive, which is actually the truest form of being kind, is someone who is humble and they have a level of inner strength in them. But someone who is egoistic, someone who is performative, someone who is controlling, someone who is insecure, they actually act out of an outward perspective because they think that most likely even how they look outside is their worth. But someone who is very submissive, or someone who is very humble, they have built their confidence in themselves. They know that what's in them, what their heart is actually surrendered to, who is God, which is the word of God, who is the will of God. Like they do not need to prove any point to someone. They do not need to try and convince people to be at the same wavelength as them. Why? Because they already know what they are speaking, like I said, is just out of truth. And if you agree with what they say or not, they do not care. They simply move on with life. But someone who is egoistic, they try and prove their point. They are very defensive. They want people to understand them. Exactly. Basically, long story short, someone who is very egoistic is someone who wants people to understand them. But someone who is very submissive to God, someone who is very humble in heart, they do not care if people understand them or not. Because at the end of the day, they already know that as long as God cares about what I say, as long as God cares about what I do, as long as God is pleased about what I say or do, then that's all that matters. And another thing about people who are very egoistic is that, like I said, yeah, if I may expound on the outside part, like they view themselves as an outside being. Like, for example, for women, women who think that they have a pretty face, like they build their self-worth, they build their confidence on their body or their face. If you do not even give them any sense of compliment within a day, they tend to they go crazy, you know. But someone who knows that, and even for men, when it comes to them like being like masculine, you know, like they think that them having the most biggest body, them even not in a bad way, think that they have good dick game in bed is what builds their confidence. That's false. But someone who is truly humble, someone who is submissive to God, someone who has the right type of confidence, is someone who knows that it's their character that makes them who they are. It's who they build on themselves on a day to day basis, is what makes them who they truly are. So, like I said, humility, submission is about inward appearance, but ego is about outward appearance. So as I conclude this video about true confidence, actually reflect on what I've said. Actually go to a quiet place and actually be in your thoughts. Ask yourself, what type of confidence am I carrying within myself? Is it a confidence of inner strength, which is of submission, which is of humility? Or is it of fake confidence? Is it of man's confidence? Is it of the world's confidence, which is of ego, of pride, of insecurity, of control, of dominance? Genuinely ask yourself this by there. And then now, whenever you get to know your answer, just act. It's as simple as that. Yes, you may fall short because we are human. Yes, sometimes your ego may take over you. Yes, sometimes your insecurities may take over you. But the best way to actually be more knowledgeable about them is by you simply just being in solitude. And this is something that I really advocate everyone to do. Just learn to be by yourself, learn to be alone, learn to not get to receive validation from people, learn to get to receive validation from God and even yourself. Because at the end of the day, validation from man is very temporary, as I even say it in my TikTok videos. But God's validation is permanent. God's validation is eternal. God's validation is not changing, but man's validation is very changing. So just sit down with yourself and just reflect. Think upon your life. How do you carry yourself? What type of confidence are you carrying out there? And then once you, like I said, once you just get to know the answer, just act. Just act. First and foremost, don't even just act. Just pray and submit and surrender and align your heart to God's heart. Then you will actually carry the true confidence of God, which is of submission and of humility, not of ego and not of pride. Bless.